if they want to salvage what's left of their reputations and credibility at all, they can't be Joe's lapdogs any longer. They just can't. And Joe, well, to be fair, he's not taking it very well. Listen.
President Biden, how involved were you in your son's Chinese shakedown text message? Were you sitting there? Were you involved?
No, I wasn't.
Were you?
No.
All right, it's not really any wonder why President Joe Biden is upset. No! You see, it seems obvious now that practically everything he said about Hunter and his business dealings is, well, a complete lie. Let me ask you, why would someone lie about that repeatedly, time and time again when asked? Well, I personally would guess it's because you're trying to hide something. And with more evidence filling out every day, Merrick Garland and the president, well, they have a lot of explaining to do, that's for sure. But instead, the policy from the top is to say nothing at all. However, the questions are not going away. There is blood in the water, and the media is getting in line with the Democrats to push Joe Biden out of the 2024 race for president. You may not think so, but I'm telling you, they want Joe out, and they want him out as soon as possible. But even so, the damage being done may ripple through the party because so many stood with Joe Biden. Or like Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer would say, she was riding with Biden. And that may be the kiss of death when they keep learning more about the bribery and the money laundering that's now connected to several countries and all leading back to the Biden family. And the left can't really ignore any of this anymore. The big networks are not ignoring the sham investigation into Hunter Biden anymore either. CBS News, for example, is putting it all out there, all of it. And Shapley is their key witness to the crimes committed by Biden Incorporated. Listen.
There were personal expenses that were taken as business expenses. Prostitutes, sex club memberships, hotel rooms for purported drug dealers.
How much did Hunter Biden owe in taxes?
So from 2014 to 2019, it was $2.2 million.
The back taxes were paid off, and last week, the Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney in Delaware, David Weiss, reached an agreement with Hunter Biden. The president's son would admit to a firearm charge and plead guilty for his failure to pay taxes. If a judge signs off, the deal means no jail time.
Now we'll see if the media, if the mainstream media, that is, keeps this solely focused on Hunter or actually moves to scrutinizing Merrick Garland and President Joe Biden, as they no doubt should. And amazingly, CBS actually did some of that in its reporting. Here's more.
And Shapley told lawmakers that U.S. Attorney Weiss was blocked from bringing stronger charges. But U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland said last week that Weiss was not.
I'd say he was given complete authority to make all decisions on his own.
And in a letter to House Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan 3 weeks ago, Weiss himself wrote he had ultimate authority.
I documented exactly what happened, and it doesn't seem to match what the Attorney General or the U.S. Attorney are saying today.
Shapley provided lawmakers this contemporaneous email he wrote after an October meeting last year. Shapley says Weiss told him the opposite, that Weiss is not the deciding person on whether charges are filed.
It was just shocking to me.
Shapley, who is still working for the IRS, told us that even before President Biden took office, he was directed to avoid leads involving Hunter's father.
And I'm sorry, leftists, but this is a much bigger scandal than should carry much more weight and much more criminal weight than anything President Trump is facing for storing boxes of documents at his Mar-a-Lago home surrounded by Secret Service agents that he had the power to declassify whenever he wanted while in office. So here's Shapley explaining more about how these investigations were hindered, hobbled, and basically blocked. Listen to this.
There were certain investigative steps that we weren't allowed to take that could have led us to President Biden.
And you wanted to take them?
We needed to take them.
And you weren't allowed to take them?
That's correct.
Not allowed to take them. That's correct. Now, CBS goes on to say at that point in Shapley's testimony, Donald Trump was still president and Bill Barr was still the attorney general. It's an important point. However, do you think Donald Trump stopped any investigation into Hunter Biden? I highly doubt it. Someone down the chain, however, seems that they did. And now with a so-called Mr. X corroborating the comments that Shapley is taking and talking about everywhere, well, there really may be nowhere for Democrats to run or hide. They've all been in lockstep, you see, with Joe Biden, even though many have known for a long time just how crooked he is. They're all on the hook for this. And Shapley and the other whistleblowers, well, they're not going anywhere. And you know who was in power when Hunter Biden was charged? His dad, as well as Merrick Garland. And IRS whistleblower Shapley says Hunter Biden should have absolutely been charged with more, a lot more. A bit more. Here it is.
When prosecutors don't allow you to put the subject's name on document requests or on search warrants, then it raises the possibility that there's more information out there we didn't find. But based on all of the financial records that we did find, they've been analyzed. And it was around $8.3 million he received.
From who? They
came from China, from CEFC, came from Ukraine, and from Romania. And even the Burisma money, and it's kind of a aspect that we didn't get into, but the 2014 and 2015 tax years when the Burisma money was coming in, I mean, to this day, there's still around $400,000 of unreported income from Burisma in 2014. Hunter Biden was told by his partner Eric Schwerin that he needed to amend his returns, and he never did. So D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office declining those charges, David Weiss requesting special counsel authority and being denied, and then the statute of limitations then expires in November or December of 2022. So those years are gone, and there's no way to recoup the money from that Burisma income.
That money is gone. Let me ask you something. When have you ever heard about the IRS not going after every single penny it could? Ever. But for some reason, they left a huge amount of money on the table for Hunter Biden to keep. And I wonder, could that have anything to do with his last name? Oh, and that is not all. You see, Shapley says the biggest felony charges in all of this were left out altogether. Remarkable. Here's one more comment.
Is there criminal implications in what you were investigating when it comes to Hunter Biden?
Oh, absolutely. And, the most substantive felony charges were left off the table.
Which would have been what?
Which would have been evasion for 14, false return for 18 and 2019. So as of right now, in the information that's been out there in the public, it uses the term in excess of $100,000 for 2017 and separately for 2018. The true number is $580,000 of failure to pay for 2017 and $620,000 for 2018. Yet this document puts it close to $100,000.
And how about those WhatsApp messages? The shakedown sent from Hunter Biden to the Chinese saying that they needed to pay right then and there because his dad was involved and literally in the room sitting with him. Well, Shapley says prosecutors did not support trying to see if Joe Biden was actually there or involved or anything. What? Seriously? Yeah, seriously. Listen.
This WhatsApp message, I mean, it obviously raised the most eyebrows in Washington because it seems to go directly to this. Do you know if there was an effort to authenticate that or to make sure that that had been followed?
Sure, and that was the reason why that was included in my testimony, was because when we received the attorney-client filter-reviewed copy of information from the search warrant to Apple, which produced that document, we went back to the prosecutors and we requested to take various investigative steps, and they were not supported. And when they weren't supported, they said, well, maybe he wasn't co-located with him. So, well, we can take investigative steps to see if that happened, right. And they didn't support anything in relation to that effort, and it's consistent with their ongoing theme of not allowing us to pursue or ask questions about President Biden, the big guy.
Not allowed to ask, not allowed to pursue, not allowed to approach the subject at all. Pretty remarkable, isn't it? Do you think the DOJ under Donald Trump or Joe Biden would have treated Donald Trump that way? Obviously, you know the answer. So, the existence and testimony of multiple whistleblowers now puts the DOJ's recounting of events in the crosshairs because somebody is lying here. U.S. Attorney David Weiss is now sticking with his boss, Merrick Garland, but the whistleblowers say Weiss was singing a much different tune behind the scenes. It wasn't this way, you see. David Weiss was not allowed to make the decisions. Here's that.
The Delaware U.S. Attorney David Weiss, according to you, had made this disclosure on October 7th, 2022, meeting with top IRS and FBI officials, saying what?
So I was there and I witnessed this personally, and he started with, he's not the deciding person on whether or not charges are filed or not.
Not the deciding person on whether charges are filed with Hunter Biden.
That's correct.
Who was?
So ultimately, this, if you follow the path of where the venue leads you, they went to the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office in March of 2022, and they presented this case to them. At the same time as that was occurring, they requested discovery from the agents, which is a typical step when they're getting ready to charge. Now, I wasn't in those meetings. I asked to be in those meetings, as did the case agent, so we didn't help present to them. But after that occurred, he was no longer looking to charge in that district.
So that's earth-shattering news. It's a Biden-appointed D.C. U.S. Attorney, Matthew Graves, would not allow him to charge in his district.
So I didn't learn that fact until October 7th of 2022, so looking back to March of 2022. And that's when David Weiss, in October 7th, 2022, said that the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office will not allow us to charge there. And then he added that he would request he requested special counsel authority and was denied.
And was denied. Like I said, somebody is lying. Maybe a lot of somebodies. Do you think it's the Biden administration who, let's face it, have lied at every turn about this? Or is it the whistleblowers, like Gary Shapley there? I know where I'm putting my money, and I'm guessing you do too. I'm betting on Gary Shapley, and I'm betting this is a long way from over. We'll be following it closely right here on Real America's Voice. Now, coming up after the break, officials are looking into what could be a burner phone owned by President Joe Biden. A burner phone, like one the drug dealers use. Why would our president need one of those, and what was it used for? Seamus Bruner from the Government Accountability Institute will join me next with details on America's Voice Live. Don't go anywhere. Well, from where I sit, it looks like the walls are closing in on President Joe Biden. Now, remember, they said that time and time again about Donald Trump, but it just never played out. This time, it looks real to me. Last week, the Government Accountability Institute tipped off the House Oversight Committee to look into what could be a burner phone, owned apparently by Joe Biden and paid for by one of Hunter Biden's former businesses. Yeah, can't make that one up. A burner phone for the president paid for by Hunter Biden's company, you know, the ones that Joe says he knows nothing about. And earlier today, here's what Just the News host John Solomon claims happened when he called that phone. Watch this.
By the way, before it was turned over from the FBI, there had been some documents that law enforcement had gotten through other means. And one of those documents got leaked to me, and it had a cell phone number that Hunter Biden was paid for. So I figured, oh, this is my chance. Maybe I can. I've been trying to get fair comment from Hunter Biden, so I'm going to call the cell phone. So I called the cell phone, and guess who picked up the phone?
Oh, boy.
Joe Biden.
Joe?
Joe Biden.
What?
Boy, was he shocked when he picked up the phone and found out it was me. He hung up pretty quickly.
Now, apparently he hung back up, but I'd like to know what was asked, what was said. Joining me live now to discuss the individual, the man who discovered the phone's existence in the first place in the Government Accountability Institute, Seamus Bruner, author of Compromised, How Money and Politics Drive FBI Corruption. Seamus, thank you for being here.
It's great to be with you, Steve.
So tell us, how did you track down the existence of this phone in the first place? And then we're going to talk about how significant it is. But how did you get a lead on this?
Yeah, so when we got the laptop, we started searching through it for, obviously, Joe Biden, Vice President, VP, and we came across some references, JRB, for Joseph Robinette Biden. And so, you know, sometimes Joe, as well as the big guy, they'd refer to him as JRB. And one of the emails we found was between Hunter's assistant and Hunter's ex-wife's divorce attorney. He was going through this divorce with Kathleen, and this is another deadbeat dad story of Hunter Biden. He was trying to dodge alimony and child support payments, and so they were emailing the divorce attorney all of Hunter's bills for the month and why he can't afford to pay more money. And among those bills, we found just 6 letters, AT&T, parentheses, JRB. And so that kind of sent us down a rabbit hole of what is this AT&T, what is this JRB, and come to find Hunter had been paying for over 11 years a secret phone line for Joe Biden. Now, we say secret because this, you know, the vice president, Secret Service would want to know the types of people who the vice president is communicating who might be, you know, having leverage over him. And, you know, this is an undisclosed phone line. And it's actually even worse than Joe Biden having a burner phone because this is proof, smoking gun proof, that his son was making gifts, undisclosed gifts. That's what a bill payment would be. I mean, we calculated 11 years, more than $25,000 in payments that Hunter has funneled to Joe in the form of this phone bill. And then on top of that, it wasn't just Hunter paying it from his personal accounts. He was using his Rosemont Seneca business account. And Rosemont Seneca is the business that the Chinese and the Ukrainians were funneling money to. So, you know, it's a
So Seamus, that would be one of the companies that Joe Biden says he had no knowledge of because he never had conversations with Hunter Biden about this or anything else related to his businesses. But we're told now, okay, so John Solomon calls the phone. Clearly, it's in Joe Biden's possession, so the number was accurate. Did you guys ever call it?
We did. We never got through to anybody, and it didn't have a, welcome to the Biden family business voicemail. But we did not have luck. John called it much earlier. We didn't get this until late 2020. But we've seen photos with Joe. We've seen photos with Joe having multiple phones on his desk, and we believe that one of those phones would have been this phone.
So I wonder where he was sitting when John Solomon called and he picked up the phone, and then he slammed it back down. Where does this lead? What does this tell you? What does this indicate to you about Joe Biden having a burner phone? Why on earth would the Vice President of the United States and now the President of the United States having a burner phone that's connected directly to his son and all of this other corruption?
Well, we believe these phone records need to be subpoenaed either by oversight or some other committee because one of the reasons to have a burner phone is everything that the vice president does officially in his office, whether it's visitors or phone calls, is recorded, and it could be subject to either FOIA or other congressional inquiry. But this phone is off the
You have
books.
a burner phone.
Apparently, yeah, it's in Hunter's name. We need to subpoena the records because the type of thing that could happen is Joe Biden's talking to. We have plenty of emails from the laptops from Hunter's business associates saying, spoke with your father. I mean, of course, Joe Biden saying he never talked about business is a total lie, and we've got 100 instances why that's true. And some of these are Hunter's business associates saying we spoke to your father. So that may have been on this line. There's been recordings that were released of Joe talking to Ukrainian officials after the $1 billion, you're not getting the $1 billion threat he made. There's plenty of instances where if we could get the records, know who he was calling, who he was texting, these could be very, smoking gun records that Joe Biden was intimately involved in Hunter's business dealings.
So, Seamus, I'm going to make the leap of faith. You're already pursuing those phone records. You're already demanding that they be released. I assume you're going after them.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. All right, and if we find multiple phone calls to Joe Biden or to whomever else, I mean, here's the thing. A lot of the numbers, we may have an idea of who they came from. We may not know who they came from. If it's other burner phones, people all over Washington right now are throwing burner phones into the gutter if they've been having conversation with Joe Biden. I mean, all over Washington, they're falling in trash cans magically, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, in Washington and Beijing and Kiev.
Yeah. Yeah, in Moscow, the capital of Romania, apparently, where because money was flowing in there. I mean, this gets worse
Iraq,
every single
Caribbean.
day. Yeah, it gets worse every day, doesn't it?
Every continent. It does. Yeah. It gets worse every day.
Full-time grifters since 1972. Biden Incorporated. I'll give you the last word.
Well, this is really just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, these phone records are going to show, I think, big things because we already know. I mean, there's no point for Joe to have this burner phone other than to speak off the record, off of any sort of FOIA-able logs that the White House would have kept. We know that he had it for 11 years, that Hunter was paying it for 11 years. So we don't just need the phone records. We need to get some guidance from the Office of Government Ethics on, can your son be paying your phone bills if you're a public official, and does that count as an undisclosed gift? And then,
well, and one more thing.
Where that money came
clearly,
from, the Chinese.
Yeah, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, the Ukrainians, who knows? But one more thing. Our colleague John Solomon will likely be called to testify now because we know the phone was still in use because he called it, and it was answered by the President of the United States. So John Solomon, trying to report the news, became part of the news. Seamus, good work. When you have more, please come back.
Will do, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I've heard a lot of crazy things in my life. That's just jaw-dropping. I mean, that is just jaw-dropping. The audacity of that, having a burner phone that sits on the desk. So there's photographic evidence. There's multiple phones there. Which one is it? Gets worse every day for these folks. Coming up after the break, California has passed 2 pieces of legislation that essentially permits state-sponsored kidnapping. That's what critics say. We'll have the story straight ahead right here on America's Voice Live. Don't go anywhere. The state of California passing two pieces of legislation that have the potential to remove parental consent for children 12 to 17 to consent to mental health treatment and counseling if the child is, quote, mature enough to participate intelligently in the outpatient services or residential shelter services. 12-year-olds. Both AB 665 and AB 957 allow for self-consent of minors for mental health counseling and shelter without parental input. Critics argue this could lead to children being chemically castrated and physically mutilated while in a state-sponsored facility. Associated Press maintains this is a distorted view, stating the bill does not change the process of the child welfare system and no changes to children's removal from homes. The AP claims the bill allows minors to seek mental health services, allowing for the discussion of gender identity without parental consent. Minors will still need parental consent for medical procedures. That's the claim. The proposed bill is written to include Medi-Cal recipients. AB 665 amends state bill, Senate bill that is 543, which granted minors access to mental health treatment, signed by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger back in 2010. Bill's sponsor, California Assemblywoman Wendy Carrillo, said the legislation does not allow the removal of minors from their parents. Carrillo said AB 665 is about creating equity. I love that word. For Medi-Cal-insured youth who, unlike their peers with private insurance, were left out of the original policy due to a recession. The state of California cannot continue to restrict access to critical mental health care services based on socioeconomic backgrounds. Neither of the bills allows for hormone blockers or surgical procedures without parental consent, they claim. California Governor Gavin Newsom expected to sign the legislation, and it will go into effect immediately on July 1st, 2024. I stand corrected. Meanwhile, in Russia, the Kremlin has arrested a top Russian military general connected to the Wagner Group's rebellion. General Sergei Surovikin has been apprehended for his role in the rebellion after being reported as missing following the recording of a video calling on the Wagner Group to end its march. The video has widely scrutinized as hostage style, with Surovikin seemingly reading words off a script to a camera unwillingly. U.S. intelligence sources and others from inside Russia claim that Surovikin had knowledge of the coup before it happened and played a part in facilitating it due to sharing some of the same complaints that the Wagner Group leader did as the two fought together in Ukraine. The Kremlin now backtracking its non-prosecution agreements with the mercenary group as it continues investigating the entire incident. The leader, as you probably know, exiled to Belarus, as NATO member states and surrounding countries are sounding the alarm on a potential Wagner army building up in Belarus. We'll keep an eye on it for you. Coming up after the break, the Supreme Court hands down a huge ruling on affirmative action. Big news. Heritage Foundation's Jonathan Butcher will join me live to talk about what we can expect going forward right here on AVL. Earlier today, the United States Supreme Court handing down another major ruling, this time on affirmative action, rejecting the use of race as a factor in college admissions as a violation of the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. In a 6-3 decision, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote in the majority opinion, quote, "A benefit to a student who overcame racial discrimination, for example, must be tied to that student's courage and determination." The court did not rule out race entirely in admission programs, adding, "Nothing prohibits universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race affected the applicant's life, so long as that discussion is concretely tied to a quality of character or unique ability to that particular applicant and what they can contribute to the university." Here with me to discuss this is Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Jonathan Butcher. Jonathan, good to see you today.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
So how far-reaching is this, then? There was a bit of an asterisk there on the left, on the end of that, saying, well, you know, they could talk about how race has impacted their journey, their life, something of that nature. But how clear-cut is this? University of North Carolina, Harvard were on the receiving end of this decision primarily, but it affects all colleges and universities, does it not?
That's right, it does. Any college that accepts federal money, which is virtually every college in the United States. I mean, look, the justices said in the majority opinion that this is a continuation of the Brown versus Board of Education ruling. And they said that if you're going to get rid of discrimination, you have to get rid of discrimination everywhere. And so I think this is a significant victory for students from all walks of life, from every background, because research actually finds that when students from minority races and ethnicities are given racial preferences and admitted to colleges, they can be mismatched to those schools. And that results in lower grades, in less success, less likelihood of graduation, and then a harder time as they enter the workforce. So this is important for students from all backgrounds.
Where would we be right now if cases like this had two more justices like those on the left that seem to have no interest whatsoever in the law or the 14th Amendment or the Constitution in general?
Well, there's a real possibility that, we could be looking at another generation of the use of racial preferences. I mean, remember, in the decision that was almost 23 years ago, the last one that talked about racial preferences, they said, well, there should be about 25 more years before we can be done with this idea of using race as a determining factor in college admissions. So I think what the court has said in saying that discrimination has no place in the process of college admissions or frankly anywhere else, I think they have set us up to now work on the actual obstacles that prevent students from succeeding. Failing public schools and K-12 systems, obstacles in neighborhoods that are unsafe for children to grow up, the ability to have well-trained police officers in those areas, all of the different things that contribute to positive family formation. These are all of the things now that policymakers and all Americans can begin to work on. Now that we've put this terrible issue of racial discrimination aside, at least from the perspective of the Supreme Court.
So let me ask you this, Jonathan. I want to take this to the next step in the conversation, which is ideas like diversity, equity, and inclusion. The reason I bring this up is because a lot of these institutions are force-feeding faculty members and students and so forth the idea that if you're a white person, you're a racist by birth. And you're forcing people to take these classes because if you don't admit that you're a racist for being white, then, well, maybe you can't work at this university or this college. What kind of an impact, influence might this have? Maybe not determinative, but it could be persuasive, I believe, Jonathan, this ruling today.
Well, certainly. I mean, look, surveys show that Americans, on average, oppose the use of racial preferences in college admissions. We've had surveys from the Pew Research Center that have shown this for many, many years. There is an easy connection to make between the passage of Prop 209 in California in the late 1990s and the widespread growth of DEI offices on college campuses. These DEI centers were built to be political centers that push the idea that race is a determining factor in your life. And so now that we have the court saying that discrimination is inappropriate, I think that we should be asking, why are we spending public taxpayer dollars on DEI programs. The research and studies on DEI programs show that they do not change individual behavior. They don't change individual attitudes when people are surveyed about what they feel like after they go through a diversity training program. And look, this is research that's been promoted by the Washington Post, by the New York Times, even by McKinsey and Company. I mean, look, I think that it is common knowledge that DEI programs are not effective at changing individual opinion. So I think that now we can have a real discussion about how do we make sure that merit, that hard work, that attitude, and overcoming obstacles, those are the things that determine success for a student as they head into college and into the life after.
So the rebirth of meritocracy is what you're saying, Jonathan, the rebirth of meritocracy. And DEI, like I said, I don't believe this is a determinative ruling on the Supreme Court on this issue, but it can be influential. It can be persuasive, and it's something that I think future courts at different levels of the federal bench will be looking at this decision and how it might impact DEI and other race-based decision-making processes, certainly that involve federal money. What do you think?
Without question, because what we'll see are colleges who try to go around this decision. I think that colleges now are going to try to circumvent bans on racial preferences, which means that we will have students and other advocacy groups who will file lawsuits against schools and say, you need to make your admissions procedures transparent so we know what they are. You need to have students asking these schools to provide evidence. And so, yes, I mean, courts in the future are going to look back and make sure that whatever a college chooses to do, that they are not using race as a determining factor in their admissions programs.
Yeah, and on campus in general. Another big win for the Constitution today, Jonathan. Greatly appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, coming up after the break, President Joe Biden was out bragging that his economic policies are, well, saving America. The question is, does anybody believe him? Do you? We'll have Brandon Arnold coming up next to talk about that right here on America's Voice Live. President Joe Biden made a pitch yesterday to a very skeptical public that the United States economy is thriving under what he now calls bidenomics. By the way, this will be the worst PR rollout since Bud Light did their thing. His first mistake was combining his name to the word economics. That is a guaranteed losing message today, especially when you say things like this. Listen.
This is the moment we're finally going to make a break and move away from an economy that has existed in a fundamentally different direction.
Sure. Also, Biden went on to say that his administration's efforts were sparking a recovery after Republican policies had crushed America's middle class. Yeah, okay. But the poll said only 1 in 3 Americans, the adults that is, approve of his economic leadership. 34%. It's even lower than his overall approval rating that hovers somewhere between 38 and 41%. So why this message and why now? I'll tell you why, because they're desperate. Brandon Arnold, who is the president of the National Taxpayer Union, will explain to us now what this all means. Brandon, good to have you here. Look, inflation is cumulative. And right now, since Joe Biden took office, the price of groceries is up more than 15%. Well, they could say inflation's only 4% now. It's cumulative. Everybody knows that everything's been going up for quite some time. And this idea of bidenomics, I seriously think this is the worst PR stunt since Bud Light rolled out whatever it is that they rolled out. I believe it. I think it's going to be a disaster. I think that when the economy turns a little bit sour here at the end of the year going into 24, and Republicans are going to plaster bidenomics everywhere, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the difference is, of course, that you can boycott Bud Light if you'd like. You can't really boycott what's happening in this country. But this is a gaslighting tour. They're trying to tell us that the sun is shining, that the rainbows are out and birds are chirping, when all you need to do is go to the grocery store, as you suggested, and see that food is incredibly expensive. Gasoline has fallen slightly, but still energy costs are quite high. Housing costs have gotten extraordinarily expensive to the point that we have people that are homeless right now at an alarming rate. So everything is not hunky-dory as Biden would like to tell us it is. Yet for some reason, he and his congressional allies in the Democratic Party are all trying to go out there and make this pitch that things are fantastic. They should talk to their constituents. They should actually engage in normal conversations with the people around them to find out people don't feel that way.
Well, they don't go out and talk to the ordinary people. They don't go talk to the peasants, Brandon. Those are the little people. Why would they talk to the peasants, the little people? Look, I mean, you can look around this country. You have homeless, just blocks of homeless people in San Francisco and Los Angeles and San Antonio, all over the place. The idea that the economy is doing well, the people are happy, and everybody's thrilled with what's going on is nonsense. I mean, you go, again, you pointed out, you go to the grocery store, you pick up things you picked up a year ago or 2 years ago. It's jaw-dropping. It's eye-popping. It is unbelievable, the increases in some things, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that really concerns me about this is Americans have had to dip into their savings to pay for just routine expenses, what used to be routine expenses. And you look at the credit card situation, we now are at a point where we have almost $1 trillion in credit card debt as a country. We talk a lot about the federal government's debt, but the debt that Americans are carrying right now in order to, again, just pay for the basic necessities of life is crushing. And what we're going to see, we've already begun to see this, is higher default rates on these credit card payments, higher default rates on car payments, housing payments, things like that. This is going to have a short-term impact of making people, in some situations, losing their residence, losing their automobiles, and a longer-term impact in terms of creating an economic catastrophe, potentially. There's so many people, so many economists right now that think we're right on the verge of a recession. I think if that is the case, which it very well may be, it'll be led by these defaults that'll happen in automobiles, housing, and elsewhere with people unable to pay for the basic necessities of life.
I think this will turn out to be one of the worst branding decisions, and I mean that, Brandon, because Bidenomics, all indications are that by the back end of this year, growth will slow even more. We're only at 1% to begin with, so it's already anemic, to say the least. Going into 2024, a number of people that watch this very closely believe that we're going to be in at least a soft recession, right? The Fed, maybe more interest rate increases, which means people will lose jobs, and the cost of getting a mortgage will be out of reach for most people. Bidenomics, I think, is going to be synonymous with failure. Failure. not success. And I think that this is going to be hung right around their necks. That's what I think is going to come down the pipe. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, they're lemmings right now. If they're following Biden off this cliff, they're absolute lemmings because they know the truth. They know that people are struggling out there. All you have to do is Google polls on the economy. You posted one on the screen there. There are dozens of other polls that all say the same thing. Nearly 75% of Americans think we're on the wrong track. That's not just a Republican situation. That's not independents. That's everybody, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, think that we're on the wrong economic path. To say otherwise is really just tone deaf. They're not listening to their constituents. They're not hearing about these troubles that people are facing right now. Again, we're not talking about not having to skip a vacation or forego a major purchase, though of course that is happening. We're talking about being able to put food on your table, to pay your utility bill, to pay your mortgage, those basic necessities. All of those things have gotten more expensive under this president. What he needs to do is a course correction. What he needs to do is tell us, listen, we've been in a bad spot right now, but we're going to fix this. We're going to reduce the costs of consumer goods. We're going to help increase the supply of things like housing so we can start to drive down those costs. That's not what's happening at all. He just thinks that his plans have been fantastic, that they've all been working. He's been insulated from reality, and somebody needs to give him a wake-up call.
Yeah, and one other thing that you just touched on there that I'll underline for the folks, the number of people that are getting booted because they haven't been able to pay the rent, or they're getting behind on the rent, and the foreclosures on mortgages, and landlords saying, you got to go. That's going on, too. Brandon, I don't think it's going to get better. We'll keep an eye on bidenomics, and I'm sure you'll be back to talk about it with me. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. All right, we'll get back to the news after a quick break, and this is very timely. A message from our sponsor, My Patriot Supply. Folks, if you think you don't need emergency food, you better think again. The government recently said that there could be food shortages coming. According to some, part of America's annual planted food crops won't be harvested this year. Drought, fertilizer shortages, other problems, and that would mean food would be very scarce and very expensive. Is your family prepared for that or any other emergency? If not, now is the time to stock up on emergency food from My Patriot Supply at discount prices. Go to preparewithrav.com and you'll save big on each 4-week emergency food kit you need for your family. You get breakfast, lunch, dinner, drinks, snacks too. It'll keep everybody going strong in that time of crisis. Best of all, the food's, well, it's delicious. Your whole family will love it. And act now, and you can save big on each 4-week kit you need. Go to preparewithrav.com and get free shipping, too. What could be easier? Listen, you'll never forgive yourself if you let your family suffer if you're not prepared, so do this. Go to preparewithrav.com. Preparewithrav.com and make sure your family is fed. Now, after the break, a story that reminds us just how wonderful America is, plus your answers to the America's Voice question of the day. It's straight ahead, right here on ABL. Well, every day here on the program, we talk about things that make America great. Here's one for you. Firefighters famous in society for their life-saving efforts, but it's not always by pulling people out of burning buildings, as it turns out. One firefighter was pulling an overnight shift at his station in Ocala, Florida, when he heard an alarm go off. It wasn't the sign to jump into the engine and rev up the sirens. Rather, it was the alarm that someone had abandoned a child in the safe haven baby box outside. Believing it might be a false alarm, the man went outside to check, and lying there wrapped in a pink blanket was a beautiful little girl. Her name's Zoe. His name is anonymous for family privacy reasons. As it turns out, this firefighter had been trying to have a baby with his wife for a decade, no luck. And he had a feeling she'd be on board with the idea of his bursting heart, concocting on that faithful early morning. Oh, boy. However, the protocol for the safe haven baby box, a device that allows someone to safely and anonymously abandon a child, no questions asked. If any infants are found inside, should be taken to the hospital. That's number one. The firefighter wrote a note explaining his desire to adopt the little one attached to Zoe's blanket and then turned her over to the hospital. 2 days after finding her in the box, she was at home with a couple en route for an official adoption. True story. They've been trying to have a baby for 10 years. The first thing that the couple wants to do is to address the parents who legally surrendered this child. They want them to know that they thank the mother for keeping the child safe and bringing the child to a place that she knew was going to be taken care of. That's a great story. That really is a great story. All right, your question of the day. The evidence mounting against Joe Biden and Merrick Garland, will they ever face accountability? I can guess what you say. Judah Steele writes, if we get rid of Biden, who is left? Kamala? She's horrible. You got to get rid of both. Dawn Rowley Bacon, I hope so. But we know they won't. Set of laws for me and another set of for them makes me sick at what they're doing. Yeah, some truth. And Dean Maynard writes, no, they will not because they are Democrats. You know how crooked Democrats are. It's Biden Incorporated. Don't forget to drop me a note. Go to SteveGruber.com. Say, hey, Steve, this is what's happening. Like it, love it, hate it, whatever. SteveGruber.com. Drop me a note. Tell me about a story if you'd like. And don't forget to join me to kick off tomorrow, Friday, Free for All Friday on the Steve Gruber Show, 6 o'clock Eastern. And then right back here for America's Voice Live. See you then.